There was a lot of food tourism. I didn't eat. I like that stuff. Yeah, come up and lead us in the flag. Give me the flag. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to all the fifth Monday meeting.
This is your opportunity to bring up any subject you want with the city, as long as it's relevant to the city. So if you'd like to speak, just raise your hand and come forward and give us your name and address, and the microphone's yours. Who'd like to speak? Come on.
Yes.
Gentlemen, please hold first.
I can just do.
Just leave it up there.
All right.
And give us your name and address for the record, please.
Certainly. My name is Forrest Buchanan, and I live at 225 Nesta Court in Roswell, Georgia. A few of the things I'd like to bring up is about maybe as long as a year ago, over in Roswell East, there was a police officer that was wounded at a apartment complex. I never found out, what is his condition.
Chief, if you'll come forward and give us a report.
How you doing, Forrest Buchanan?
Rusty Grant.
Hey, nice to meet you.
John Latham was the officer that was injured. He has recovered pretty much from his wounds from that day, but he is still out on leave at this point.
Do we have any suspects?
We're continuing to investigate. We don't have any real firm suspects at this time, but as leads come in, we continue to investigate. But we haven't arrested anyone at this point, and I would say we're not real close to arresting somebody at this point.
Do you get a lot of calls from those apartment complexes?
Like calls for service or calls on that investigation?
No, calls on service.
Yeah, we get a number of calls. I can't tell you off the top of my head the number of calls that we get, but yeah, we do get a number of calls for service in the apartment complexes.
Okay, great, thank you. I'd like to thank you. I've been here living about 20 years, and finally a street sweeper came down my street, so I want to thank you all for that. The other thing that I've been complaining about is that during the day, on non-business hours, to get out of my subdivision, there's a 2-minute wait on the light. All along Holcomb Bridge, if you're trying to get onto Holcomb Bridge or cross it, there's a 2-minute wait. And during the day, I just can't understand why there's a 2-minute wait before you get the green light.
That would be directed to our transportation department. Steve Asenbrecht, you seem to be here.
Hi, Forrest Buchanan. I think we met.
Which side street are you talking about?
This is the
If
back
y'all will speak into the microphone, I'm sure there are
the
other
back
folks
entrance
interested.
to Horseshoe Bend. It's steeplechase.
The back entrance.
But all along Holcomb Bridge in that area, to get onto or cross it, it's a 2-minute wait.
Yeah, that's actually pretty standard. The corridor is Highway 140, and it's dictated by the Georgia Department of Transportation. We fall under an umbrella program that they have called RTOP, Regional Traffic Operations Program, where they have consultants which basically their job is to maximize the throughput through the corridor. And so we are your advocates for side streets. They are the advocates for regional mobility. So we wrestle and fight with them all the time. We argue for more side street time. They argue for more mainline time. And there's kind of this tension that goes on between us. But I mean, I would certainly be happy to look at the two steeplechase connections and look if there's an error in the controller, if there's something we can do. But 2 minutes on a side street on a busy 4-lane or 6-lane corridor is actually pretty common.
Okay, and also I asked you the last time I was here, when you're coming down, you're heading south down the 400, and you're going to get off at Holcomb Bridge to go, I guess, west, and they have...
Coming down 400 and getting off at exit 7 to go west?
Yes.
On Holcomb Bridge, okay?
Southbound. Where
Yeah,
I said about
right.
that middle lane would turn both
Right.
ways. It's still that one way.
Well, we actually have we're working with Georgia Department of Transportation on that southbound ramp, and they are going to redesign that whole thing. They're paying for that, and they're going to make some significant improvements in that. So that's actually in the pipeline. I mean, we communicated your concerns last time, and we're working with the southbound off-ramp and the southbound on-ramp are both going to be completely redone.
Okay.
I can't tell you when. They're in design right now, but they are in GDOT's program.
Okay. The last question for you is on Holcomb Bridge 400. Why don't we try the diverging diamond, I think is what's it called?
We actually looked at the diverging diamond when we did our Holcomb Bridge corridor study several years ago. We looked at everything, soup to nuts. The diverging diamond works great when the receiving lanes flow. So if you are trying to if you're going across Holcomb Bridge, and we did the diverging diamond, which is basically swap the lanes so that you can do the free flow left, as long as Georgia 400 was moving, it works. As soon as Georgia 400 tightens up, it backs up all the way through the system, and it failed in that regard for us. So we explored it, and we basically couldn't make it work.
The last thing for you is that, again, on steeplechase on the rear entrance to Holcomb Bridge.
Now, rear, which, east or west?
East.
East or west, okay.
East end. When I go to leave my subdivision at 8 o'clock in the morning, there's actually a line for me to get out of our subdivision. And that red light is jammed up usually. Not that many people will just sit in the middle and block everybody. But, I mean, can't we do something? I mean, can't the city of Roswell take control of that stretch of highway?
No. No, we have a beneficial occupancy relationship with them. It's a state route that runs through the city of Roswell. We have 5 of them, and we work with GDOT. We maintain all the signals. Again, we fight for our citizens for fair and equitable time. We do intersection improvements like the one you're talking about on the east side there. We can relook at the geometry, and if we can come up with an idea that GDOT will approve, then we can add that into our project list as a project.
Well, I think part of the problem is that red light that you all approved years ago for that Gresham, I think, the dinner in the movie theater.
Actually, I want to set the record straight. The city non-concurred with that signal.
But it was still put in.
It was still put in, but we non-concurred with it.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. The other thing is, during the day, when you go through in front of Holcomb Bridge Middle School, there's a big flashing light when the school zones, and people are just blowing through that school zone. I mean, they don't even pay any attention. I think if you all want to get some money for the city and also to cut down on anything, is to put a policeman out there a couple of days a week or once a week, just to catch people blowing through that school zone.
Our chief doesn't need to come to the microphone,
right.
but he will take that under advisement.
Okay.
Our goal is not to raise revenue through our police, but to encourage compliance with the law. And we have a traffic division of our police department, and they look at those areas in which there is non-compliance, and our chief will make a note of it. And so thank you for bringing that to our attention.
The other thing is, I don't know if you all get it, I'm retired, but I'm getting an inordinate amount of sales calls. The last two were the IRS was going to sue me. The third one was that...
Are these door-to-door calls or
no,
phone
this is
calls?
telephone.
Telephone calls.
And then Microsoft had a new system that was going to improve my computer. I also, there's a Rachel that keeps promising me that this is the last call, my last chance, and about lowering my interest rate on my credit cards. Is there anything that the city of Roswell can do to slow this
It
down?
is outside the city's control, but David, Bob Halsey, are you familiar with it? Isn't there a federal law that you can get on a no-call list, sort of?
Yes, sir, but in my experience, it's not very effective.
No, I've been on the no-call list, and you never hear anything.
It's not, this is federal law and beyond the scope of what the city controls.
Okay.
Yes, Councilmember Diamond.
My understanding is that no-call list expires in 5 years and you have to re-up it, and I did notice that I got more. The IRS calls you're getting are a scam, and
Yes, I
we
know.
have had a number of people that have been taken in by it, so, we've reported the number, and they know it's happening, but they haven't been able to do much about it. It seems to be a nationwide issue.
Ms. Price, could you talk to your husband about this? I know he's busy with the budget, but could you slip a word in for us on that? I'd appreciate it. The last thing, and you all, of course, would make it politically correct, but in speaking to the policemen out there, it seems like Roswell gets an inordinate amount of calls to apartment complexes, and why don't they start paying for that? If you get X amount of calls, then you start paying for the calls.
Well, we do have a provision that if there are false alarms for our fire department that we charge, but it is not our policy to charge for police calls, and I'm not sure we could even do that. Mr. Halsey, would that even be an option? Charges for calls to 911 for police service, I'm not even sure it'd be legal.
I'm not aware of an ordinance that we've got in that regard.
I'm not sure, but I'm not even sure we could pass an ordinance to that effect. Anyway, I appreciate your concern. What we do try to do is encourage a better class of tenant in our apartments through a number of methods. We've got, our police works with them, our code enforcement works with them, and we have a long-standing program to encourage maintaining higher standards in the apartments. But as far as the number of calls, that's unfortunate, but it comes with the territory.
Okay. And then my last thing is, I've gotten 2 of these in the mail in the last year. Does the city of Roswell get any benefit from that?
Is this Gas South?
Yes.
K-Love, you could address that. Yes, sir. The answer is yes.
Yes, sir. We are in a program with Gas South so that new accounts that are open or transfers from one gas provider to another, the city does receive a per account amount. It's a small amount. I think one is $12 annually and the other is $20-something annually.
From all the gas providers or just
No,
gas?
sir. It's only Gas South.
South.
It's called an alliance program
Okay.
that we have partnered with them.
Excuse me. On the mailing, do they pay all the cost of that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Well, great. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
We're to just leave it up here?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Who'd like to speak next? Yes, come forward, please.
Whatever. Hi, my name is Janet Russell, and happy anniversary to me. 42 years ago this month, I moved into the house I still live in Roswell, Georgia. I have chosen to live here because I like living here, and I am the eternal optimist, and that is why I continue to come to City Council, although most of my comments seem to fall on deaf ears. I want to address a couple of issues, so it's not as much as it looks like I had to handwrite it. Because I viewed the city of Roswell and all of its issues as very organic. There's a term in South Africa that says Ubuntu, which means I exist because you exist. Without you, I don't exist. And it's the same with programs and development and individuals in Roswell. I'm very concerned that Roswell is trying to grow the city without growing the community. I always tell people I live within my community because the operative words there are with and in. You can choose to live in a city, but you make no connections with human beings. You just sort of mow the lawn and go to work. I've chosen to live within this community. I've been very concerned about the growth and the development and the direction this city has taken. I've embraced the growth because when I moved here there was 2 restaurants, a Dairy Queen and Bob's Dairy Barn. And as I told people, you used to be able to buy white bread and orange cheese. And it wasn't fun. I flew home every 6 weeks to San Francisco to bring back what I had grown up with, which is tortillas and egg roll wrappers and pastas and salamis and Portuguese sausage, and home it came, back to Roswell. I had a friend back there say, "How do you eat a grit?" Because they'd never heard of grits. So it seems to me that Roswell is experiencing some growing pains again, and it's really not a very pretty sight. It seems to me that Roswell's leaders have kind of put us into a competition with our neighboring cities of Alpharetta and Sandy Springs. Roswell's trying to be like them. The funny thing is, everybody in Alpharetta and Sandy Springs says, we're trying to be just like Roswell. And they can't be like we are, because they don't have over 150 years worth of history and layers and layers and layers of people and experiences and different architectures that create a really vibrant place. That's what makes us so unique. When I ask people that have just moved here, why did you pick Roswell? Because it has a different personality. It's not like all the other places. So now what we're seeing is being the tearing down of a lot of the older homes because they're not big enough. Or in the case of the Fraser Street apartments, what we got now is perfectly hideous. It reminds me of Section 8 housing that used to be under the 880 freeway in Berkeley. I used to feel sorry for people that lived there because there was no green. There was no trees. They were stacked on top of each other. And I didn't grow up in a mansion. I grew up in a city house in the Bay Area. 32-foot frontage. And I felt sorry for them, and that's what I feel sorry with there. Those are hideous, hideous apartments. When they were framing those, I looked in as I drove by, and there isn't even room to put a queen-size bed in some of those rooms. That's how small they are. Shame on Roswell. That should have remained affordable housing, because the black people and then the Hispanic people that used to live there were living what the millennial urban dream is. They didn't need a car. They walked to everything. The library was close by, and they had a restaurant in the back of the Mexican grocery store. But we kicked them out, and we watched them come back to build those apartments. So Roswell's trying to be like everybody else, and I don't know how many of you have children, but we all remember telling our teenagers, you've got to be true to yourself. Don't try to be like everybody else. Be who you are. And I would urge Roswell to do the same thing you would advocate to children. You are yourself. Stop trying to be like everybody else. So with that in mind, I think we all agree that SR 9 is a mess. It's really, really sad. It was the main economic thoroughfare when I moved here. We had so many things. We did have grocery stores, drug stores that delivered. We had hobby shops. We had beauty shops. We had men's clothing, women's clothing, much more than we have now. It is very sad. However, the streetscape that we spent all that money on really didn't do much good at all. It's really still pretty pathetic when the tree is as big as this, and the stick holding it up is bigger than the tree. It's not pretty. And there still aren't many crosswalks, so the people that do live in the corridor can't get across Highway 9 safely. I know we're real concerned about right here, but there are people that actually live on that corridor like me, and we can't get across Highway 9. So, regarding the sidewalk issue, I just want to throw out here that if Roswell really wants to be like Sandy Springs, you need to get your butt in gear. Because in the last 6 months, they have just completed the most ambitious sidewalk project I have ever seen. The sidewalk extends from the bridge almost to Mount Vernon Highway, way, way down deep into Sandy Springs, on both sides of the road, with trees that have trunks this big, with full foliage, and benches, and lights. I don't know, it only took them 6 months. It took me 2 years to get the corner fixed where they had dug it up and left it. I said I would take a bag of gravel and do it myself and invite Channel 2 News. Thanks to Mrs. Price, it got done the next morning. SR9 is the main artery through this town. And you know, without healthy arteries, you can't have healthy hearts. And that's why the center is suffering, and I don't mean this part. This isn't the heart of Roswell. I don't know who named that park, but when I moved here, it was a rusted-out pickup truck and a bunch of old tires stacked in the middle with dirt and broken glass and rusty beer cans. I always wondered when they redeveloped it why they didn't put in a fountain or a gazebo. Because that's what attracts people. There's nothing to attract people there. Nothing. No wonder it doesn't get used. And you're all concerned about, why doesn't anybody use it? Well, duh! It's pretty usable. It's not usable. It's not. There's no shade. It's unattractive. It just looks like a little putting green. Maybe that's what you could do. Call it a mini putting green, since everybody needs to be entertained all the time. So since SR9 is the main artery, a couple years ago you decided that, oh, we need some more help. Let's form another committee. So you appointed the DDA. They were all volunteers who, coincidentally, most of them are real estate agents and developers. But they were hand-chosen by you. I am reminded that God so loved the world, He did not send a committee to save it. The DDA met for 2 years on a Tuesday at 3:30. How convenient for everybody with a job. And by their own acknowledgement, they said they had a really crummy website, but they needed more money from the city to get the word out. I found out about the DDA last March by mistake. I got a PDF by mistake. Now, they had met for 2 years, this group of dedicated individuals, and the only solution they could come up with to solve the clogged artery of Highway 9 was to destroy the only beautiful thing that's on it. And that's to cut down this woodland forest that we live in downtown Roswell, and to move our Faces of War Memorial. All I can think of is they picked the lowest hanging fruit. They figured nobody would notice. Now, we all know the value of trees. In fact, Mrs. Wynn is quoted at one meeting a couple months ago of saying every single tree is important. I really like that, Miss Wynn, because you're right. However, apparently these trees are not important because since then you've taken down about 100, you've exempted yourselves from the tree ordinance, and you've done it because you said it made it dark. And I reminded you that trees do not make dark, night makes dark. Day makes light. If trees made dark, then the parking lot that's over there by the Presbyterian Church, which has over 60 historic lamps in it and has no trees, would not be dark at night, but it is. So you used it as an excuse to start the deforestation of this property. Did you think we wouldn't miss the birds, the quiet? I forget which one of you was quoted in this week's newspaper as saying, we might need to put some trees in the middle of whatever we do with Highway 9 because trees are a traffic calming device. Really? What do you think you got here, folks? God's gift to traffic calming. Now, since the Faces of War Memorial was also in the way, and as one of them said at a DDA meeting, it's such a downer to have people parking back there and going to Canton Street to have fun. We don't need it in anybody's face. We need to move it. Excuse me? What do you think? I just fell off a turnip truck? So here's a few comments. I'm the messenger right now that I've heard from people when I tell them about the city green, which is a misnomer because anytime you're cutting down 200 trees, it should be called the city brown. When I tell them this is what they want to do, the comments are usually, why? I'm not surprised. Follow the money. See who gets the contracts. Why? Is nothing sacred? What are they thinking? I don't really want to see City Hall. It's where I pay my property taxes. So now I hear that the Faces of War Memorial, because I attended the City Advisory Committee meeting last week, and Mr. Fish, who's very nice, he and I have had long conversations, said they're considering moving it to a garden to put it in a more contemplative place. It gives it more respect. We want to use it for education. That's what Monica Hagwood has said. Those are all words that look like it sounds like the summary of a focus group. We're not a stupid group of people here, folks. Well, you know, the Faces of War Memorial does not need to be in a quiet, contemplative space. It needs to be in your face and my face every day. Every day. Because you need to be reminded that over 2 million men of my generation went to that war. And they didn't have a choice. You need to be reminded of this, that in that war, 3 sets of fathers and sons died. 39,996 of them were 22 years or younger. 8,283 of them were 19. 33,103 were 18. 12 were 17. 5 were 16, and 1 was 15. 997 were killed on the first day they arrived in Vietnam. 1,448 were killed on their last day in Vietnam. There were 31 sets of brothers who died in that war, and there were 31 sets of parents who lost their sons. 8 women died, 6,000 served. You hear only numbers. To those who survived, we see faces, and we feel the pain that those numbers created. I told you last year that I don't go away. And I'm going to give you a little example. In 1968, I was on the tarmac in Saigon at Tan Son Nhut Air Base. You know, I was a flight attendant and I did the troop movements back and forth. I was 22 years old. I know, I look young. And one of our responsibilities was to guard the plane when we were on the ground while it was getting cleaned and catered. And there were no AP units. That means alternative power unit, which provided air conditioning for our planes. It was really hot, 100 degrees, humidity, high, horrible, no air blowing, and we couldn't get off the planes. Because at night, the Viet Cong were there, but during the day, they were Vietnamese working. So they shifted we used to say, on whoever filled the rice bowl. So we had to guard the galleys to make sure they didn't stick bombs in the galleys and stick them in the bathrooms and stick them under the seats. We didn't get to rest. That was after working 10 or 12 hours. We didn't have a limit on our time. And I used to work the flights to Sydney and to Darwin for R&R as well. And everything that we got catered was catered in Australia and brought back in ice, so that the guys leaving Vietnam after being in country for 13 months could have fresh ice cream and fresh milk and Australian steaks and sourdough rolls. I remember that meal like it was yesterday. Well, coming out, they were starving. They ate everything in sight. They were so hungry because all they had was reconstituted milk. It was horrible. But coming back from Sydney, they didn't eat anything. They were really hungover. They'd been with hookers all week. They were tired guys. I got to know all the prostitutes that drove them up to the plane on their Jeeps, because we didn't have TSA back then. Well, maybe TSA stood for something else. So I knew what was going to happen, and we kept all the food on the plane in cold ice, or dry ice. And when we got to Saigon, I can remember this Vietnamese guy who was the station manager coming up to me and saying, "You give me that ice cream and that milk." Now, I was 22. I was a young girl. And I looked at him, I said, "No, you don't get it." He said, "But I want it now." And I said, "No, it's for my guys." Because I would give it to the guys working on the tarmacs, or give it to the guys that were going out to the bush. And see, they would turn around and sell it to our guys. And I said, "No." And he got in my face and he said, "You're going to give it to me because I'm going to have you fired if you don't. I'll contact your boss." I said, "What a good idea." This is before cell phones. I said, "Let's go in the air traffic controllers, because I know the CEO of my company. He's in Oakland, California, and I just met him last week again. I'm sure he'll be real happy to hear how you're treating me and stealing our food." That was the end of that problem. You see, I don't back down very easily. So I'm not backing down on this memorial. You people have no idea the significance of that memorial, exactly where it is. If you could lift up those blinds right now, the sun is going down. Every day a sun sets on that memorial somebody else is reminded that they don't have their family with them. Did you know that since the war ended, and it's 40 years ago this week that the war ended, the last soldiers left Saigon, 250,000 men have died from Agent Orange-related diseases. And they had to fight to get compensation. Fortunately, it serves as a reminder what can happen in the future, because just 3 days ago the federal government acknowledged that men and women who were in Iraq who were subjected to chemical warfare will now not have to fight for their health care or their benefits because they've been damaged. But if you don't think that didn't happen because Vietnam happened, you're crazy. Every time I come up the stairs, and I know you've all been to the Atlanta airport and you all come up the escalator, and you see a group of people holding signs that says, "Welcome home," don't you? Do you know why that happens? Because nobody welcomed home the men of my generation. They had stuff thrown at them. They were called baby killers. They were called horrible, horrible names. And they're still waiting to be welcomed home. Yesterday, by the way, was National Welcome Home Vietnam Veteran Day, and it went unacknowledged by the city of Roswell, as did Veterans Day. So that's one of the reasons you need to keep that memorial exactly where it is, in your face all the time. I don't care what you want to develop or not. It's in the way, it's a downer, it's a bummer. That's what I heard from the DDA. Excuse me, folks. I am not surprised, but I am appalled. You really want to solve the problem of Highway 9? Start at Holcomb Bridge Road, the most important commercial intersection in this city. It makes Buford Highway look like Rodeo Drive. You've got a tacky shopping center built in the 60s where the clock is stopped at 20 minutes to 6 and hasn't had a coat of paint on the front in probably 20 years. And in fact, there's a chain across it that says, "Private property, no trespassing, no cars allowed on the driveway." Wow, special. Real special. Now, I happen to like Big Lots and Dollar Tree. I go there all the time. The other 1,000-car empty spaces are not very user-friendly to pedestrians if you're trying to create a walkable community. Now, I heard across the street just got sold, the Roswell Village Shopping Center. That'll be interesting. Have no idea what they're going to do with it. But I have to wonder why you didn't address the issue of the shopping center at Holcomb Bridge, except that the owner's on the DDA. And why didn't he step forward and say, you know, as an act of faith in the redevelopment of this city, we're going to take the step forward and work on our shopping center and all the other properties that they own down 9. It's nothing personal. It's all business, just like them. You do not destroy the beauty, the only pretty thing that's on Highway 9, which is this wooded forest and that memorial, to clean up the arteries? No. The DDA did what they wanted to do because they thought nobody was looking. Now, last year this project was going to be $6 million, and now it's $12 million. And somebody mentioned to me it might be $20 million before we get done. Whoa. That's a lot of dollars. And based on that, the water treatment plant went from $8 million to $16 million in 5 years, and we didn't get to vote on it. It seems like the people that live in the center of town are getting hosed again. Citizens of Roswell are not happy, City Council. They're not happy with what's going on. I know you don't hear it because the people you associate with slap your back and shake your hands and you all eat lunch together and they tell you what a fabulous job you're doing. Now, I respect you individually. I think you're all really nice, honest people. I tell people that all the time. But I also tell them they're way out of their league. Remember what you tell your teenager? Be yourself. Be true to yourself. Stop trying to be something else. Nobody wants to come here because we have coals. They come here for this. But if you destroy it, you destroy the goose that lays the golden egg. You know, I volunteered to be on the advisory committee for the City Green. I sent you my resume. I felt like I was applying for a job at the UN. Not one of you replied and said, "Thank you for volunteering, Janet." Not one of you. And of course, I got from Ms. Wakefield the notice that you had denied me to be on the City Council, on the advisory committee as a citizen at large. I guess the city just has so many volunteers, you just had to fight them all off. think it's interesting. What can I say? A woman who was in Vietnam as a civilian, a Hispanic, a college graduate, who's given thousands of hours to this town because she loves it, and yet, on the council, the advisory council, you have a man, I don't know who he was, who's on the Memorial Day committee. The Memorial Day celebration commemoration is 3 hours, 1 day a year. Why would he be on the committee and not me? Also, the young man that's representing Bike Roswell. Interesting. I was a founding member of Bike Roswell, served on the board. So I had that box checked too. Nope. I'm not surprised though, because I'm not one of the in crowd, never have tried to be, because I have to be true to myself too. I find it very interesting. One thing I do know is that when you constantly associate with people who are just like yourself, you will make the same mistakes over and over again, and you wonder why the city is faltering. So, I want to talk about a couple of things because I don't think that you understand the full impact of what you're trying to do with this city green. I know that you want people to park back there to go over there. Well, you're creating a problem to create another problem. You're creating a solution to create a problem. You know, I'm in tourism 35 years. I know how people want to move around the world, from villages to cities to cruise ships to whatever. If all your activity is on the west side of Highway 9, why would you want people to park on the east side so you can then figure out how to get them over the highway? The solution's in front of you. You've got the Wells Fargo Bank, which is already 3 stories. Buy it from them. You're willing to spend $12 million to $20 million on this mess, not including how you're going to get them across 9. Buy the bank. Put small retail on the bottom like they've done in Buckhead or in other cities that I've been in. Parking garage, lighted, for a fee. You're already paying for valet. Solar panels on the top, which will then create energy for the 98 street lamps that are on Canton Street, which, by the way, looks like a runway on the airport. It's nice and bright, though. There are 8 on the City Hall property. That's why it's dark. It's not because of the trees, folks. And until recently, you didn't even put the floodlight on the Faces of War Memorial. And the poor World War II Memorial looks like a Lego stuck in the ground that some kid dropped there. So what you do then is you make a 3-story parking garage, because you don't have to now change anything. It's already 3 stories. It's been there since I moved here. It already has impervious surface down. You don't have to worry about that. You invite the Wells Fargo Bank to move over here to the corner of Hill Street to that ugly piece of junk building that has been built in the 60s. That's a direct marketing building. They buy it. Now you've created your civic community center by having a financial center on the corner with plenty of parking, because Labor Ready is gone and so is the next building. And you've got a fabulous passport expedite service, by the way, if you've never used it. Mayor Wood's secretary sent me an email the other day. Where can a person get a visa for China, Janet? Within 1 minute, I said, you can walk from City Hall to get your visa. Those women are as professional as anybody. She was so nice. Thank you so much. I knew you'd be the person to answer the question. You're missing the boat. You're creating more problems than you're solving. You put the parking garage back there, people can now exit. You know that West Alley thing you're working on? They're now in the West Alley. They can now walk down Webb Street. You've avoided the whole issue of Highway 9, which you say is so dangerous, and yet there are 2 crosswalks with traffic lights. I don't have any where I live. 42 years, I can't get across the street safely. I came home from Mexico last month. I thought I was going to get killed at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday. So, I'm not sure what the problem is or why you can't see the forest for the trees, but you don't have to cut those trees down to look for the forest. The problem doesn't need to be as big. You want an open space where you have gatherings. I loved the pictures I saw last week in the advisory committee. People lounging on the grass. Not anybody I know is going to lay on herbicide, pesticide, completely covered green grass. No, they're not going to let their kids play on it. Nobody's going to lay on it. Nobody. And most of us that sit down can't get up. At least I'm looking at a crowd here. Maybe one of you could get up off the ground gracefully. You want an open space? It's on the other side of the building where the stairs are. You've got 4 or 6 trees that give no shade, no canopy, no nothing. Take them out. We used to have permanent, temporary stages set up when the symphony came here to play, right on the City Hall property. Do it again. You don't need to build $1 million amphitheater for 100 people that aren't going to hear anything if you take down the trees. If you want to know what that's like, go to the church parking lot by my house and try to have a conversation at 6 o'clock. You can't hear each other. You're spinning your wheels, folks. You're spinning your wheels. And that's another comment somebody said. What do we need an amphitheater for? We've got the permanent stage down at Riverside Park, for God's sake. I said, because they're spending money like drunken sailors on shore leave. So let's move on. Now, down by me, I have a concept I'm calling the mini village within the village. You know, you've all come up with, you've talked all these focus groups about villages, walkability. Well, there's a difference between within walking distance and walkability. I live within walking distance of lots, but I can't walk anywhere. Why? Because the city has been negligent for 42 years and refuses to provide us with adequate sidewalks. Or any. This crosswalk on 9 is a joke. I mean, people don't want to use it now. And it's not because, as the mayor said, we need to have them have a destination. No! They don't need a destination. This is not Legoland. The destination is they're going to eat. You're in Paris. You need to get across the street. You don't go, oh, is that an interesting building that I really want to cross and see? No! You just follow the light and you cross. The problem is you've got a group of young people that grew up in suburbia. Their mothers drove them everywhere. They don't even know how to use a crosswalk or a light. We have 11 crosswalks on Canton Street and they don't use them. They walk in between them thinking that the space between the crosswalks is their right of way. And now that you've passed the open carry law with the liquor, that mixed with the open carry of the gun, with testosterone-driven men, there will be a homicide on Canton Street. I can assure you of that. I know humans very well. Now, Highway 9. You know, there's about 4,000 of us that live between the river and the square. And I think the front page, the front cover of your recreation brochure says we live in a, Nancy, you've quoted it, a premier riverside community or something. I know, it was your come to Jesus moment when you went to Greenville. You came up with that. Well, I live there, but I can't get there unless I get in my car. Because, you see, I don't have a sidewalk on either side of the street again. Nothing. Nothing. Now, I think it's on Crabapple Road where you took the sidewalk path, and instead of it being right next to the road, you brought it up on a little path up and over the hill a little bit. They did that in Woodstock. When you leave the square and you walk toward the park and to the library, they took it away from the highway. Well, you know, you could do that right by where we live. They dug it out when they put in the water pipes, and I said, hey, it's all dug out. Put down a pervious surface and get us off the highway because it's a death trap, and we could walk almost all the way to the river. Nope, didn't happen. Too creative. Now that you've decided that everyone wants to live downtown, even though those of us who've lived there for a long time have always been treated like it was Plan B. Plan A was we wanted to live in Horseshoe Bend or Brookville West or Martin's Landing, but we couldn't afford it or whatever, so we had to settle for downtown. You see, it was never a Plan B for me. When I moved here, I was married, and my husband said, what do you need? I said, I need a city with its high school name, with a name on it that it's the name of the town. I wanted Roswell High School. I didn't want Lassiter or Centennial. I wanted the city's name on the high school. You know why? Because the city had identity. That was important. And I said, and I want to live on the bus line. Because my dad was a bus driver, and I grew up on the bus. And to now that I'm older, and you know they're going to name a bus after me when I die, I took the bus and the train yesterday to go to Palm Sunday services downtown Atlanta at MLK. Do you know how many older people I met I hadn't seen for years, like 20 years, that used to live in Martin's Landing? And I said, I still live in the same house downtown. And they went, gosh, you live downtown on the bus? I went, yep. It's great. You know, when you're a senior, it's only 85 cents, so why would you drive? You have to be nuts. Over 65, Jerry, that's you. You could ride the bus, you don't have to ride the bike. Or you could put the bike on the front of the bus and then pretend you rode someplace. And it's a gift. To arrive with no stress wherever you're going is fabulous. I will go tomorrow to Emory University to a lecture on the bus and the bike, the bus to the train to the bus. 85 cents in each direction. It's very safe, and I always meet nice people. But Roswell got $1,645,000 from MARTA and chose to spend only $250,000 of it on bus shelters and those camping seats. So every time I drive by and I see someone standing in the rain, I remember how you didn't think they were important enough to take them in out of the rain. It would be really nice if all the neighbors keep saying, when are we ever going to be able to walk anywhere? I said, well, honey, the only way I'm leaving this town's in an urn at this point. It isn't happening while I'm alive. So here's another problem. This historic riverside community we live in that we can't get to unless we drive. Now the good weather's coming, and guess what? When we drive there, there's no parking. You have denied us the right to walk there, and you force us to drive. And when we get there, every parking space is full with Cobb, Bartow, Cherokee, Forsyth, Hall, DeKalb, more Cobb, because we all know the Cobbers don't like to pay taxes, and they like to use all our parks, as they have told me, because Cobb now charges to park at their river parks. And I have said, and they sheepishly always say, we live in East Cobb, like, ha 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 ha, silly us. And they say, but we love your concerts and we love your parks. And I say, feel free to send a check to our city administrator as a token of your appreciation. Well, I think it's time that you give out to citizens of Roswell who pay taxes here or who live here in apartments. They pay taxes through their rent. The same kind of sticker we get when we go to the recycling center, where I don't have to pay $20 to recycle my refrigerator or my dishwasher or whatever. Because it's time that we get something for our money. And when I go down there and I see people parked all along the shoulder of the roads and in every parking space known, and I have to go home. I could have walked there, but I couldn't walk there. So I had to drive there, but I couldn't stay there. It's time there be Roswell resident, stickered parking designated, and then a few that are not. And they don't have to pay those other people, but let them fend for themselves. I know that sounds territorial, but yeah, I am. I'm really tired of going down there and going, well, guess I'm going home. Guess I'm going home. Now, I have another question with regard to this riverside community we live in. You know, I love the river. I see it every day. I grew up on the ocean in San Francisco Bay. I have to see water every day. It is my spiritual food. Down there by Riverside Landing, which, by the way, Debbie Ephraim does an amazing job running that building. You guys are so lucky you have her. She didn't tell me to say that. She'll be embarrassed when she hears this. The Atlanta Junior Rowing Association practices every day just about, from 4 o'clock, 3:30, whatever. And they have a huge building that they lease for I don't know how much. And they have like all those long boats in it. And out they come when they practice, and they're cute kids, and they're all built just the same, tall and skinny. And they go down the ramp, you know, to the floating dock, and they come back. And the entire parking lot of the Riverside Landing is full of their cars. Which means that people in Roswell who would like to go down to that parking lot and park and go to the river cannot, because those kids are using the parking lot. Now, I'd like to know, one, how much do they pay for the lease of that building? How many boats are in it? Because I went to their website, and those kids are paying a lot of money to be part of this association. A lot of money. And you know, I love sports, and I love everything that's outdoors. But I'd like to know, because if it's really reasonable, I want to buy a kayak, and I want to store it there for the same per boat rate they pay. And I'd like to know how many members of the AJHR, whatever it's called, are residents of Roswell. Because, again, are we giving a break to a club that is primarily not Roswell residents and denying people that live here the right to use that things that we're paying for? Again, I am the messenger. People are not happy. I know you're really tired of me talking, but that's too bad. I want you to know that the The last issue, which I just read about, was the firehouse and $80,000 worth of artwork on a firehouse. I thought that was from The Onion or Andy Borowitz. As much as I love beautiful art, 4 weeks ago, you don't know it, I was in Guanajuato, Mexico. It was built in the 1600s. It's the most extraordinary town. I don't know how many people live there. And I went to San Miguel. And it looks like an Italian hillside town, and in San Miguel there's lots of outdoor artwork. They're both art cities with a university, and they're great. So I enjoy art very much. However, considering that we pay our firemen $14.80 an hour and keep them on part-time so they don't get benefits, I think that putting a piece of artwork worth $80,000 is a slap in their face, because I think they'd much rather put food on their table than feed themselves looking at a picture. So here's an idea, because, I always think out of the box, folks, always. See, I'm not constrained by politics. What you need to do is make the actual firehouse an architectural art piece. Have you ever been to Ponce in Puerto Rico? Google it. Firehouse, Ponce, Puerto Rico. It's a colonial city. People get off cruise ships and take tours just to go to Ponce to see the firehouse. I was in Ponce in December. I went to Puerto Rico for a week. Be creative. Don't just say, oh gosh, we need a firehouse and we'll put a picture in front or a sculpture of, some guy putting out a fire, because they couldn't pay me enough to run into a burning building. Ever. And then we have, as I suggested, we were designing, which never went anywhere, the bridge, which goes to nowhere, by the way. We're up to $250,000 on the design plan for a bridge that will connect to nothing unless I can walk there, which I can't, so then I'll have to drive to the bridge to walk across to walk back so I can drive home. We have at Georgia Tech one of the finest engineering and architectural schools in the country. Do what other creative cities have done. Have a contest. Talk to the head of the department and say, we want to have a contest among your students who can design the most creative, fabulous building. And give a plan. $50,000 could be the prize. It will pay for 2 guys to get their master's degrees. Why not be the good guy in this thing? Why not raise the bar? Why not listen to your better angels? Please. I'm so tired of being mediocre. Now, some people say, oh, Janet, you just get so wired up. Well, let me tell you, death is imminent for everyone in this room. In 30 years, I don't think anybody in this room will be alive and breathing on this planet, unless you know something we don't. And because death is imminent, I choose to live my life with passion. And you can say, she's preaching. Well, too bad. Let me tell you one nice thing that happened to me this week. Well, I'll tell you why I'm never going to give up. A long time ago, I made a promise to myself I would never let anyone hurt a woman, a child, or the environment. Ever. Conscious decision. And when there was a Publix down in the grocery store in the Roswell Village, there was once like 10 checkout lanes, and they were all full of people with carts. And there was a little Mexican lady next to me with her toddler in the seat and another one in the grocery cart. And a tall white guy down at the end in the Southern gentleman's uniform, which is khakis and a Oxford cloth shirt, yelled across all these counters, "Lady, you need to be talking to them there kids in English." She was whispering to them. And everybody did nothing. I'm sure these were all church-going people who do mission work in Latin countries, but they did nothing. And I walked up to him after I checked out and I said, "Sir, why did you talk to that woman that way? She wasn't bothering you." "Well, my kids go to Roswell North and them their kids got to have special lessons because they don't speak English right." And I said, "Well, sir, let's continue this conversation in the parking lot if you don't mind." So I met him there. And he's like this tall. And I said, "Sir," he says, "I don't like my kids having to be putting up with that." And I said, "Well, sir, I think you probably could use the English lessons because you don't speak very good English yourself. Your verb subject syntax is way off." And he looked at me and I said, "Sir, do you understand how afraid you made that lady? She's like 4'11", your basic little Mexican woman, with two darling, quiet children, unlike North Fulton children that are wild animals who get everything they want and run crazy because they're all snowflakes and special." And he looked at me and he said, What do you mean? I said, we enjoy so many freedoms in our great country. Freedom from want, freedom from danger, freedom to speak, but our greatest freedom is freedom from fear. And you just made that woman afraid. How dare you deny her a freedom that we all cherish? And he said, what do you mean? Because, you know, nothing like a tall white man. And I said, sir, let me explain something to you. I grew up in a house where we spoke 3 languages. And I think I'm about as well spoken as anyone you can imagine. I have a degree in English and another one in medieval and Byzantine history. What do you do? And I said, I speak good English and I believe English should be the language of the school. But what happens within the intimacy of your family is your business. It's your private life. I said, how about if you took your cute little 3rd grader to the mall and you bought her a new dress that I thought was the most butt-ugly dress I'd ever seen. And when I saw her in it, I walked up and said, honey, that is the most ugly dress I've ever seen. And he said, well, I wouldn't like it. I said, no, because that was between you and your daughter, and I don't have a right to that. You did the same thing with this woman. You denied her her ability to be free of fear. And do you know what? He looked at me, and he got tears in his eyes, and he said, I am so sorry I never thought of that. I will never do that again in my life. You are right. And I said, thank you, sir. I have to make a point. I will protect women because nobody protected me. So you want to know why I'm so fierce? There's the reason. I've been a short woman in a tall man's world all my life. Now, the last good thing that happened, and this will make you feel great, and you'll be so glad that I shut up. Last week, I was meeting a client, and I was a few minutes early, believe it or not, because I actually got off my street in less than 15 minutes. And as I turned on the Highway 9, it was the morning. Pick a day. It was warm, cold, and everything in between. Walking up the street on the sidewalk was an African-American woman struggling on the sidewalk. And really struggling. Oh, I could tell that woman's back and her hip hurt, because I've been there. I fell on the ice last year, and it took me a year to recover. And her little boy that was walking with her was bending over and having a hard time breathing. And I thought, oh, that child has asthma or something. Poor guy, the pollen, it's awful. So I pulled into the parking driveway of the dentist, and I said, excuse me, ma'am, where are you going? Do you want to ride? And she said, oh, that would be so nice. And I heard the little boy say, Mommy, my wish came true. And I listened because I thought, well, nobody ever says that to me. And she said, baby, what do you mean? And he said, I wished somebody would give us a ride. Well, if you don't think that made my day. So I got her in the car, and he put him in the back seat with the seatbelt, and I said, where are you going? North Fulton Charities. I said, okay. She had a couple bags of groceries, and I said, okay, you know, you're walking to North Fulton. You know, that's like 8 miles. You can't walk there. And she said, I know. I said, the bus goes there. She said, but we don't have money for the bus. I said, okay, I understand. I said, have you ever heard of the Drake House? Because it's a fabulous, fabulous resource we have in this town for single mothers in crisis. I said, the people that run it are great. It's an oasis for women. I said, where does your little boy go to school? Because he should be in school right now. And she said, well, he goes to Cyber Academy. That's like homeschooling. He does better there. I said, okay. She was a very well-spoken woman. She says, we're just having a hard time right now. We're bouncing around with friends. So I gave her a ride to North Fulton Charities, where she was eternally grateful, and the little boy was so grateful. And this is what I mean when I started these lengthy comments with, you need to stop worrying about building a city, and you need to worry about building a community. Dr. King talked about the beloved community. That's what Roswell has the possibility to be, a beloved community, where people that live in Horseshoe Bend can talk to the people that live on Oxbow Road, and that they know them. They're not just Oxbow Road. I know we all don't connect like I do. I talk to, my kids would say I talk to a water cooler would answer back. That's who I am. I'm true to myself. And that's what this city needs to do. It needs to reevaluate what are its real priorities and do it. And it has nothing to do with the restaurants on Canton Street, because that is about to implode. 2 more places left. They vacated. Going to put in restaurants. Dress shop's gone. Going to be a restaurant. Great, we need another restaurant. We still don't have a grocery store. By the way, you got extra cash? You know that used car lot that's down by me next to where Sugo's used to be? You really want to create a walkable community? Consider this. Many neighborhoods, many villages within our village. We have 2 shopping centers that are almost on the sidewalk. They're visible from, if we had a sidewalk, visibility. And the stumbling block is that used car lot in the middle. Take that money and offer those guys $1 million for that lot and get the hell out of there. It's terrible. It's been there for 50 years. It has 3 buildings on the property that would never pass muster now. It has a shack, a trailer, and something else. And that red building, and then Alice got rid of it, but there's been some construction equipment that's all rusty on the front of where the house that fell down when they were trying to move it for weeks. Now it's going to be moved because I complained. You buy that and you go and get a Trader Joe's or a Fresh Market to move in there, and you connect it with an internal sidewalk from the shopping center where Sugo's used to be, through the shopping center, through the grocery store, and back to the next one, and you have your mini village with 5,000 people that live within that quarter-mile walking distance that you think people will use to walk anywhere. The same thing exists on Mansell Road and Holcomb Bridge by Starbucks. East on Mansell Road, you have all kinds of apartments. They're rebuilding that shopping center where Sprouts is. I brought this up to Mr. DiPolito. You have 4 corners there that are totally inaccessible by pedestrians. You must enter through a car driveway. Yeah, you've got probably 2,000 people that live in apartments 1 block away. You want to create a thriving business district with pedestrians? You have to make it welcoming. No one's going to push a stroller through a driveway where an SUV is making a right-hand turn. You put in ramps that are ADA compliant. They say, welcome, we want your business. Rich said, oh, we can't force private enterprise to do anything. No, but you can make it really attractive. You can call it the New Village. Call it whatever you want. Give it a cutesy name. But do something creative, people. Stop listening to your political buddies and your friends that you meet for lunch who want to make a deal. I've been coming here for 42 years, and I have never once asked for anything that would benefit me personally. Not ever. And do you know why? Because I was taught by nuns. And nuns taught me that I had to raise my consciousness and my level of social justice so that I could meet God someday and say, you did it, and I did it with you. Now, I want to see this community take some steps in the direction of a beloved community. We have the ability. My God, we're 165 years old, this town. Nobody else can claim that in Metro Atlanta. That's why I came up with the alternate plan for this project. And not one of you except Mrs. Price said, Janet, walk the property with me and tell me your ideas. And how about sitting down and explaining to me, how did you come up with the concept of home? Home. Let me tell you, I know you're all jealous about Avalon. 48 contracts fell through at Avalon last month. Nobody wants to live there. It isn't the Grove. I was at the Grove in December in L.A. It's not the Grove. And let me tell you this, in 30 years, no one is going to say I grew up in Avalon. No one will ever say I grew up in Avalon. But I meet kids on airplanes that go, I grew up in Roswell. I went to Roswell High. When did your daughter graduate? That's called social identity, and it's so important. I can't stress enough how important knowing where you came from will set you into, whether it's church or a town or a synagogue. If you don't have roots, you can't have wings. You cannot. And this town has the ability to give people roots, but not if you keep bulldozing everything down and building stupid apartments. Because people don't live in apartments for 30 years or 20 years. They live in them for a couple and they leave. So they don't contribute to the community, they don't volunteer, they don't clean up rivers. All these millennials, I'm going to write an essay called The Myth of the Millennials. Apparently they're making a boatload of money and they're drowning in debt. Which one is it? And they eat out 3 meals a day. But they can't pay off their college loans, but they're making a lot of money. Hello? They don't have a car payment, they don't have a house payment, and they certainly don't buy clothes. Oh, they don't shop locally because they only buy online. So don't depend on them to revive your local businesses. And they only buy junk made in China, it looks like. So they're not your great white hope coming down the pike. So I've had my say. I don't know when I'll have the next one. If I'll be alive for the next one, it doesn't matter. But just remember that the decisions you make today don't affect us. They affect 2 generations from now, 3 generations from now. And this City Green thing, you tear down those trees, and I tell you, you know how I am now. I'm not giving up. You move the Faces of War Memorial, and I will make this city a national embarrassment on national TV. I make that a promise to you today. And unlike the city, I don't break my promises, because the city promised to maintain that memorial in perpetuity. And you know what? Here's one more thing. The city paid someone named John Palmer, who owned Palmer's Cleaning Service, he was on the original committee, $1,000 a year to maintain the memorial. A year! He'd come every month, scrub the bricks, fix the pump, did everything. And John told me, Janet, they discontinued it a long time ago. I guess $90 a month was too much. So when you hear these excuses, we got to move it to a new location, because the current location isn't good for it. It's corroding and breaking down, and the mortar's in bad shape. It's not because of the location. It's because you broke your promise to maintain it. $90 a month, that's what, 2 tanks of gas? $90 a month, you stopped fixing the memorial. The pump's always never working. I try to explain to people the significance of the tears. There's no tears. I would have one more story to tell you, and it was at 9/11. How many of you were at the 9/11 ceremony? I don't remember. I was one of 2 civilians there. The one we had here was very nicely done. It was very nice. Were you there, Jerry? Somebody was there. A couple of people. It's mostly, Betty, you were there. This is how important that memorial is. I was at the memorial, and there's 2 citizens there. Otherwise, it's the employees to remember the first responders that died in 9/11. So I came. It's nice. Very nice. Holcomb Bridge Middle School kids came and sang, which was totally fun and great. They were so cute. So the whole meeting broke up. It only took like 15 minutes. You know, they do it exactly when the time of the towers fell. And Malone Dodson gave a nice talk. And the children were standing around in front of the memorial, and I asked the teacher, have the children ever seen this memorial before? Now, you know, East Roswell might as well be China. They said, no. I said, well, you know, let me explain to you why it's here. And the teacher was such a teacher. Yes, let's do it. It's a learning moment, right? So I explained about the war, and that it was probably the war their grandpas were in, because they're middle schoolers. And I said, when your grandpa came home from the war, they were told to never talk about the war ever again. Go home and ask their grandpa if they were in Vietnam. Now, these children were black, Indian, Asian, Mexican, white, red hair, blue eyes. America, right? And I told the kids, you know, one of the reasons, none of these kids, by the way, were born when 9/11 happened, which was kind of for me, that was like, wow, time. I said, you know, one of the reasons that the bombers came and took down those towers was because 92 nationalities were working in that tower, and it represented everything they hate. They can't stand the fact that in America we don't have to be the same religion or the same race or the same color or the same ethnic background, but we all just try to get along and respect each other. I said, kind of like you do at school. And I said, you represent everything they didn't like because we're all getting along. They thought that was pretty cool. So the teacher said, okay, we have to go. You know, they keep on a short leash for the bus. And there was a man standing behind us, very tall man in his military uniform, older guy. And as he left, I said, hi, how are you? Thank you for your service. Were you in Vietnam? And he said, see that man in the sculpture? I said, yeah. He said, it's me. And I looked, and it was. I went, whoa, children, time to come back a minute. I'm a teacher at heart. I said, children, I want you to meet someone really important. So they all came back, and the teacher was cool with it. I said, see that statue? That's this man. And he introduced himself, and he told them where he had been, and he was the recipient of 2 Purple Hearts. And he explained he'd been shot in the legs and shot somewhere else. And the kids' eyes were this big. This is that teaching moment that you're talking about that's so important. And so he continued. And at that point, the organizer of the 9/11 ceremony, it had been over for 20 minutes, came up and said, we need to stop this. We don't need this anymore. This is taking away from our moment. And I said, excuse me? You tell him to stop, because I'm not. Well, previously, when I told the kids about Vietnam, I'd said, you know, when they came home, nobody ever said thank you, and nobody ever said, welcome home. I said, will you make me a promise that any time you see an old man in a parking lot with his Vietnam veteran's baseball cap on, or at Trader Joe's or any place, will you walk up and say thank you and welcome home? And they went, yes, ma'am, we will. I said, I really appreciate that. And they will, too. Well, the teacher said, we have to go now, and the man stopped talking, and do you know those children all lined up without cue to shake his hand, say thank you, and welcome home. Now, I don't know about you, but you can't, you know, for everything else there's MasterCard. For this, it's priceless. That's why that memorial needs to stay where it is. That's why it's important. I'm really lucky because I get to interact with people all the time because I'm not a stuffed shirt. I like to associate with people that don't look like me, worship like me, talk like me, eat like me, nothing. I have the richest life in the world. And I wish you could have all of that too. As politicians, you don't. You don't. You only get people shaking your hand all the time telling you how swell you are. Well, I'm here to tell you you're not that swell. But you're doing a decent job. But you can do better. Thank you.
There was a question there.
No, sir, we don't. I can't answer the question as how many boats or what the residency requirement is for Atlanta Junior Rowing Club. I can tell you that the rowing club by contract pays $100 a month to the city of Roswell. And they've been doing that since they started there, 12 years ago. You're welcome.
Who would like to speak?
I'm Bob Richardson. I live at 8995 Stone Lake Court. I'm here because I have a few questions on the UDC. It's not that I really want to become involved that much in the UDC, but we have a developer who's building or planning to build a project next to our subdivision, 12 Stone subdivision. And just reading through the UDC, the comprehensive plan, I just have a few questions. For instance, there are zoning categories, RS6, RS4, and RCC that are primarily applicable to the places like the Holcomb Bridge corridor. But it says they can be built in or this zoning can also apply in exceptional situations to like other areas like the suburban residential tract. And I was looking through the UDC, I didn't see any like examples or are there any like examples, guidelines of what would be an exceptional situation that would allow this type of zoning?
It is a council decision if there are exceptional circumstances. It's a discretionary call. And I'm not aware of guidelines, but Alice Wakefield may be.
Yes, in addition to the Unified Development Code, which is the UDC, there's also a set of UDC design guidelines that basically talk about the look and the feel of development. I'm sort of at a disadvantage because I don't have a plan that's in front of me, or the UDC. Is this something that they're asking for rezoning?
No, they're not. It's just that we were at a meeting a couple weeks ago, Planning Commission meeting, and we were kind of chastised the neighborhood for not having an alternate plan. So that's why I'm becoming more involved with the UDC to see if we can come up with an acceptable compromise with the developer.
Okay.
And,
I mean, basically, what we look at when we look at a project, especially a project if it's needing any kind of zoning approval, is the comprehensive plans, which talks about, you said suburban residential, which can be a variety of things, anywhere from an acre lot to a 4,000 square foot lot. There are properties that encompass all of the zoning districts that you just talked about. I'll be glad to give you my contact information. You'll give me a call, we can pull it up and sit down and take a look at it.
The website.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And the other questions, kind of...
You've got questions about the unified development code. Feel-free call our resource.
Yes.
Alice, who should you call?
You can call me directly, but the person that deals mostly with the Unified Development Code is Brad Townsend and Jackie Diable.
Okay. Actually, I've had a lot of contact with Jackie, and
Okay.
also, and I appreciate the information she's provided, and also Marlee Press has provided a lot of information. And the other questions kind of relate to that. I don't want to really take up your time, you know, like it's better to contact. Okay, well, these are similar questions.
Or you can't choose to meet within the property, but we don't have time for
Okay,
this meeting.
great. Well, I got time, so I'll just ask the questions. Thanks. The next question is, how is like the zoning for suburban residential or parcels determined? For example, if a developer wants to build mostly single-family homes, but yet on the corner of the parcel he wants to build an attached home, is the only zoning RTH, or can it be something else?
It can be something else. We try and look at what the particular developer is asking for. We look at the different zonings that are in the area, and oftentimes, say, a developer will ask for a residential or an RTH zoning, and we will make a suggestion, an alternate suggestion. Again, it depends on where it's located, what the developer is asking for, what it's next to, and again, we also look at the comprehensive plan if there's a rezoning component to it.
Okay. All right. Final question. Looking at Chapter 3 of the UDC, residential homes, they're all RS except for the first one, which is AG. And that seems to be more of a use than like a thing. I just wonder why that stands out as AG. And the reason I'm asking is because there's 3 AG parcels surrounding our subdivision.
AG is an agriculture district. It's usually a district that's for property where there's been no type of zoning or interest in rezoning. It's kind of almost like a holding type of district. A lot of the AG property was property that was annexed from Fulton County, and it has had that designation, and the consensus of City Council and the city was to maintain that designation, so when and if someone comes in and wants to develop that, they would have to go through a rezoning process. But it's a 1 acre lot, basically, is what AG
Right,
was.
yeah. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Would you like to speak to that? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Dave Birch. I reside at 630 Oakstone Way. Is it true that there's a major consideration being made now to close our jail? Do you plan on having a public meeting on that in the near future to discuss it and get some public input?
Mayor, can you turn your mic?
We have asked our police department and our jail to look at alternatives to running our own jail to see if there are ways to operate more efficiently. So no decision has been made, but we've at this time the average number of, Chief, you'll come forward. The average number of folks in our jail is averaging 7 or 8 at a time, overnight. It was originally designed for about 60. The council a couple of years ago made the decision to send folks who are sentenced to more than 72 hours to Pelham, Georgia,
Yes.
to save money. And so we're looking long-term, or do we want to stay in the jail business? Or do we want to try to work with Fulton County or find another alternative to operating our own jail?
Okay.
So there is serious consideration, but we have not completed, the police department is looking at the alternatives and at the costs and the benefits, and that will be coming to council and eventually coming to a public vote, but there would be an opportunity to be heard before there's a
Public
final
vote?
vote. There won't be a referendum. There'll be a public it would come to a council meeting, not fifth Monday, a regular council meeting for a vote at some point in time.
Okay, good. So the public can have some input on this.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that's fine. I thank you.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone else wish to speak? Yes, sir, come forward.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. For the record, Lee Fleck, Martin's Landing. First of all, I want to compliment you for all being here for the public hearing. That's the first time I've seen you all here for the longest time. I thought you all took short sticks to who had to listen to us. But I guess you got business afterward. But really, seriously, glad to see you all here this evening. I want to begin by reading a quotation from the Center of Effective Government, because it has some bearing on what I want to discuss this evening. It's only one sentence. Won't bore you. A building block of American democracy is the idea that as citizens we have the right to information about how our government works and what it does in our name. That being stated, I'm here this evening for a couple reasons. The first is to inform this council, because I don't think many of you realize what my wife and I have been involved with the city for the last 2 months. And what it is once again, the city administration has misrepresented a city code, specifically the No Handbill Code, Article 8.9, and has for some ulterior motive instructed our code enforcement department to selectively, when I mean selectively, they're only dealing with the Roswell neighbor, threatened to cite the delivery drivers of the Roswell neighbor, the city's legal organ, which is the city's instrument containing state of Georgia mandated municipal legal announcements, to be delivered to any residents with a no handbill sticker on their mailbox, which is a significant number of homes in Roswell. Now, in case you don't think that that was actually done, I have a recording from your code enforcement manager who called my home, and I won't play the whole thing, but I will just simply play the very first part of it. Hopefully it's turned up, and hopefully you can all hear it.
City of Roswell, returning your call regarding the Roswell neighbor. Yes, we have been cracking down on them as far as, because we've had several people come in here, not just one or two, but several.
I'm not going to go on. She just goes into a litany of excuses why they're doing it. Apparently people in this city don't have enough common sense to call and discontinue having the paper delivered to their home, either when they're on vacation or they don't want it at all. So, this is a folder that the Fleck family maintains of no handbill violations over several years of the various businesses, and we forward these to your code enforcement people. This is what the whole the no handbill ordinance is all about. It has nothing to do with the newspaper. So to make it perfectly clear what the definition of a handbill is according to your own handbill code. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to read to you the definition of what handbill is. Handbill, any printed or written material, any sample or device, circular, leaflet, pamphlet, paper, booklet, flyer, or any other printed or otherwise reproduced original or copy of any manner of literature which advertises for sale any merchandise, product, commodity, service, business, opportunity, or thing, or 2, directs attention to any business or mercantile or commercial establishment or other activity for the purpose of either direct or indirect promotion, the interest thereof by sales. 3, directs attention to or advertises any meeting, theatrical performance, exhibition, or event of any kind for which an admission fee is charged or a collection is taken, or, final, I know I'm boring you, Mayor Wood, number 4, while containing reading material other than advertising material is predominantly, and let me make sure you heard that, is predominantly and essentially an advertisement and is distributed or circulated for advertising purposes or for the private benefit and gain of any person so engaged as advertiser or distributor. Now, this is a page of the Roswell Neighbor. Does that look to be predominantly advertisement? Anybody? I don't think it does. Here's another page. Does this look to be predominantly advertisement? I dare say it doesn't. One more. Three's enough. Does that look to be predominantly advertisement? I have here this is 2 months of emails with your city administrator, your city lawyer, your city code enforcement department, and your code enforcement department. Okay? Now, I'm not going to read all this. I'm not going to bore you with all this. Okay? But you can see that the text is pretty lengthy in some cases, not just one-liners. You want to look at them. My wife, I think, is very congenial in her communications normally. I think you can attest to that, can't you? I'll get into that 80,000 in a moment. But at any rate, to give you a synopsis, my wife has asked me, on her behalf, to read the following letter for council, because what we have here, what we're coming to council, and as you've told me many times, Rich, if we feel that city workers are not doing their job, then it is the right of the citizen to come to council and ask them to redress the situation. And that's what we're doing here this evening. The topic is the cancellation of the Roswell Neighbor delivery. Council members, after 2 months of attempts to get this matter resolved, I'm seeking your help in resolving my problem with not receiving my weekly Roswell Neighbor newspaper because the City Code Enforcement Division directive to the neighbor supervisor and delivery staff to halt deliveries to those residents who display a no handbill sticker on their mailbox. On behalf of all Roswell residents who display this sticker and are not receiving delivery of the neighbor, I seek your help in getting delivery reinstated. Seems like a reasonable request. This is not just the flex. as anybody with a no handbill sticker. And there's a high percentage of them. And that's why I personally think there's ulterior motives. I won't get into this. Month of February, contacted staff of the Roswell neighbor to determine why delivery of that newspaper suddenly stopped. Got numerous reasons and excuses with promises my paper would come next week. Eventually called the neighbor's Mayretta headquarters and asked to speak with Supervisor Mr. Turner, who advised that the City Code Enforcement Division threatened to fine him for every newspaper delivery made to residents displaying the no handbill sticker, as it violated city code. I feel the only violation here is my right to receive the free press, as I have been for years. March 4th, contacted Kay Love since I believe this information to be a misinterpretation of city code, as I can't believe newspapers violate my right to Roswell's legal newspaper. Advised her also that I'm still receiving all other newspapers in my driveway, the Review, AJC, and was the city planning to stop those deliveries to my house also. March 6th, Kay replied, not had chance to look into matter, and forwarded email to Code Supervisor Angie, I can't even pronounce her last name, to my husband advertising she has left message with Mr. Turner to allow deliveries to our address. Oh, okay, that was the recording I was... March 5th, my husband contacted David Davidson for help, and he offered to speak with the neighbor editor about the matter. He advised Code Enforcement is complaint-driven, but I did not complain about getting this paper delivered or to cancel it. Since someone I don't even know cancel my newspaper delivery. March 8th, I requested the specific city ordinance regarding the no handbill sticker from Kay, which I received. I did not find anywhere in the ordinance where city newspapers violated this law. March 13th, contacted Kay Love, copied David Davison, Angie, and Councilwoman Becky Wynn, still seeking their help in this matter, to no avail. There apparently is a huge discrepancy between the city's interpretation and mine over what constitutes unwanted advertising, which the no handbill sticker is supposed to prevent. Kay advised, all we can do at this point is to continue to contact the neighbor and request they resume throwing the newspaper at my home. This is not happening. March 16th, Kay advised the editor has been notified by the city to resume delivery to your home, and also that the city has no control over an independent organization that makes their own decisions about delivery. Tell me if I'm wrong, but doesn't the city have a contract with the neighbor to publish legal notice and deliver to Roswell citizens? Why can't the city demand delivery to its citizens? March 26, contacted Alice Wakefield. After Lee attended the Code NIT meeting on March 19th and was advised her department would have a meeting to look into the matter and work it out. Alice also noticed that the code fax was not working for the last 3 years. She goes into that, but that's been corrected, although that was a misquote by Ms. Wakefield. It is functional, I understand. We've always got a receipt saying it went through. Okay, March 27th, Alice advised she told Mr. Turner and Brian Clark to resume delivery of the neighbor to my residence. We'll see. So after 2 months of spinning my wheels, I still am not getting delivery of the newspaper. Therefore, council members, you all are my last resort to resolve this matter for me and the many other citizens who are being deprived of their city's legal paper and not receiving important information as to city business. Will you help? Now, that was my wife's letter to you all. I think we've advised you, and we had to look up the code and get the code and read it and provide it to Mr. Davidson. I've had many conversations myself with Mr. David, 33 emails. We were talking more about the new Senate Bill 186, which would allow cities to provide legal notice electronically, but according to Senator Albers, who co-signed the bill, and Brandon Beach, that did not make it through crossover. But it is probably coming eventually. But for now, you're still legally obligated, according to state statutes, to provide legal notices about, as I said, what it does in our name, what you do in our name. I would hope that you would all get together and go into this a little further in depth and determine whether you have the right to continue to do that. Okay, I'm not going into what I think, although I think there's ulterior motives where you're trying to limit the circulation so that a percentage of the public knows less about what's going on, and therefore I don't think you're being transparent if that's your ulterior motive. I don't know what's in your minds. I'm not clairvoyant. But it sure could be perceived as an effort to limit communication and legal notices to the public. Now I have another issue which touches slightly on what my wife talked with you about, Councilman Eichelhart, and of course, Janet, you touched on it, the $80,000 for artwork at Fire Station, which is not a public venue. I'll just say I think that's, you have this art festival every year and you have some great artists in the city and they have some beautiful artwork. There's some really superb artists. $80,000 in a fire station? I guarantee you those firemen could tell you of far better uses of that money for themselves, their equipment, and the safety of the public than pictures of fire trucks on the walls. I only touch on this $80,000 expenditure because I want to also tell you that for 2 months I've been attempting to get, not for my benefit, it's not on my street, but I've been trying to get one more light pole put up in Martin's Landing because there's a group of neighbors that have requested that I see if that can be done. I have had extensive conversations with Mike Elliott, mostly prodded by me. At any rate, my last conversation with him was, and Lonnie, could you turn this on, please? I need the overhead for a moment. And I hope you all can see that. At any rate, my most recent response from Mr. Elliott was, yes, Lee, I spoke with the director. I presume that's Mr. Ossenbach. And he is not in favor of adding more street lights that will constantly be every month electricity. I'm sure he would allow you or HOA to install the light in the ROW right of way with agreement that you or your HOA's name in their name. At any rate, I made a public records request to find out what the actual cost is to run 150-watt light bulb. And it comes down to, these figures are from Sawney, $12.50 a month. It's a grand total of $150 a year. Now, there's many neighbors in this area that pay property tax, thousands of dollars. A neighbor requests, there's no benefit to me. There's no skin off my teeth whether they get it or not. But I've done my research. The HOA is willing to pay for the pole and its construction and wiring and all that stuff. We just wanted to know, like it's done in other places, if the city will pay for the light on the light pole that's in its right of way. And I don't know what much more I can say other than to be able to spend $80,000 for artwork, and you're unwilling to spend $150 a year for electricity, for a light pole. Nancy, I sent you an email, and I hope that you would review this with Mr. Ossenbach. I don't want to get into a discussion on whether $150 is going to break the Department of Transportation budget. I certainly doubt that's the case. I think more the fact that maybe my name was on the request. And that probably carried more of the no than anything else. I don't have anything more for you this evening. Again, I say, I was glad to see you all here this evening. And I guess you've got some other business to conduct. And I'll clean up my mess and be gone. Yes, sir.
Turn your mic.
It's a matter of interpretation, but I will take a look into that issue. It may be that we may have to take a look at the ordinance, because the ordinance, as you read it, seemed to apply to advertising papers that include advertising. So the ordinance may be written. The staff, there is no ulterior motive. They receive an ordinance from the council, they interpret it, they enforce it as it's written. This council hasn't addressed the issue of handbills or made any, given staff any direction, but we'll take a look at this handbill ordinance. As far as light poles, the city spends about $1.3 million a year on lighting. We do have a policy when it comes to adding new light poles within an existing subdivision, and that policy applies across the board, whether it's one light or 50 lights, and that policy would have to be followed as far as installing new lights. It's not about one light pole, it's about establishing a policy that treats everybody the same within the city. And regarding your opinion on the public art at the fire station, I wanted to make one point. It is not art that is within the fire station, it's art that's publicly visible. It may be incorporated as part of the structure. It may be something else. We haven't placed any limitations. The only limitation that the council placed on the artwork is that it be on the property and not somewhere else. But the council does want to have something that is not just visible from the inside of the fire station, that's publicly visible elsewhere. And it's not so much focusing on a fire station, as the council has said, we're looking at new construction. And if we're looking at new construction, it would be all new city construction, and this is a pilot program. And we're also looking at for other large construction projects that are private projects. Do we want to try to encourage them to do public art? And that'd be a second phase of this. So this, the council is really looking at this as an experiment to see what the public reaction is, what it produces, how it comes about, whether this is a reasonable amount. And we do appreciate your input and the other input of people on this public art, because we want to know what the public response is. But again, it will not be artwork that is necessarily inside the fire station. More than likely it will be public art in the sense that it is publicly visible to passerbys. Councilmember Price wishes to add something.
I just had a question about the handbill sticker. Where do you get that? Where does the city issue that?
Yep.
Are there any variations of that? I mean, can we have one that says no newspapers or no handbills?
No, it's just a round one.
Well, I've seen it, yeah, but I'm wondering if we could create different ones for different preferences.
Ordinance can be amended. We'll look into it to see if that's appropriate.
Mr. Mayor?
But I'm going to take a look at this from a standpoint of how does it affect the public, and is there a need to perhaps a amendment to the ordinance to exempt newspapers? We don't know whether that, I'd have to take a harder look at it.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Nguyen.
Thank you. Since that's my department as liaison, we actually had a meeting about that today. I met with Ms. Wakefield and Ms. Love and Mr. Townsend on this. And the problem that we were having is that we were running in a wall with the neighbor, not answering our emails or our phone calls. And I think Alice finally broke through and got a hold of someone. So it's not that we were ignoring anyone and their complaint, their concerns about not getting the paper, is that we were not getting the response that was necessary for us to be able to do that. And we also discussed looking at the ordinance, because I think the first time I was on council, the first year, we had some problems with that, and it was considered litter, that it was on the driveway. How come Mr. Fleck's not getting it? I don't know. I have a sticker. I get the neighbor and the review all the time, and I know some of my neighbors. I have not heard of anybody else not getting the paper. The complaints that I get most is that they are getting them and they don't want them in their driveway. So we are looking at the ordinance. Ms. Wakefield's finally found the person that will listen to the concerns and trying to get the newspaper redelivered to Mr. Fleck at this time.
Councilmember Orleans.
Since I initiated this ordinance, I would be happy to sit with staff and kind of go over what the intent was and where it came about and how we were addressing newspapers back 15, 18 years ago.
That's all I ask is thank you. Look into it, because we're not getting anywhere with the people.
Well, again, Mr. Fleck, if we can't get the answer, Alice had spent enormous amount of time trying to find the right person to talk at the neighbor to get them to start delivering the paper. It's not that we did not want you to have the paper, it is because it seems like that they really didn't want to answer us at all, and I applaud Ms. Wakefield for her tenacity and her pit bull attitude when she gets a hold of something like this. So I do think that she did a great job on this, and I welcome meeting with Councilmember Orleans, with Ms. Wakefield and Ms. Love and Mr. Downson, and looking at the ordinance and see what we can do about it.
Yeah, please realize we're not just talking about for the Fleck family only. Okay? Because candidly, a lot of people have already asked them to deliver it to us. And that guy who's driving the truck throwing newspapers out, he doesn't know us from the man in the moon. All he sees is that little sticker. Okay? And while we're talking about artwork, Mayor, I sent all of you an email. I cordially invite you to Centennial Park for Earth Day to see the 40-foot sculpture that my daughter was involved in building. It's currently at the Dolly Museum in St. Petersburg. It is a 40-foot vortex. 4 students from Georgia State, in conjunction with 19,000 grade school children who picked up all the plastic found in the Pinellas County Inlet and ironed it with home ironing boards used for the surface of this, has made international news, and is going to be moving to various locations. Please, it's only going to be in Atlanta for 2 months. Go down and see it at Earth Day.
I thought that was quite uniquely and interesting how they did it with the stuff they're pulling out and the kids all working on it. And didn't know you had creativity in your family like that. It's good.
Well,
it's very good.
It's my mother's side. Okay, it's my mother's.
Does anyone else wish to speak?